I'm so glad I was close to my father because he set a great example. And I think women who have really close relationships with their fathers make better choices in their husbands or boyfriends, uh, how employers treat them, etc. The measure of a man is not how tall he stands, but how many times he kneels to help a child. He passed away December 2nd, 2004. That will always be the worst day of my life. You held your little girl's hand so she doesn't get lost. We always held hands. He always would hold my hand. If you ever meet somebody who doesn't like a teddy bear, you need to get as far away from them as possible because there's something seriously wrong with them. The one thing that AI can't replace, and the one thing that you cannot teach in a classroom, is caring and compassion.
Yes.
When you see children who've not had culture in their lives, it should be no surprise that you see uncultured adults.
Right.
What's your key to a successful, zestful life?
Oh, wow.
So, gentlemen, meet Carol Cunningham. She is a fantastic woman. She has an illustrious career. More importantly, she has some stories that will help us to learn how to be better men. She has stories about her father, but most importantly, she has stories about changing the world as well as helping out people throughout the world. Carol, you are a doctor. You're the medical director for the state of Ohio. You have all kinds of great careers, but first thing I want to hear and learn about is who is Maynard? And what has Maynard come about with this?
Well, I collect teddy bears, and my house looks like a pediatrician. I have teddy bears everywhere. I'm not married. I don't have children. But Maynard is my favorite teddy bear, and he's named after Maynard Ferguson.
Okay.
Because if you take his thumb out of his mouth, he has the chops of a horn player. And Maynard Ferguson, they actually met. Maynard Ferguson came to Cleveland, so Maynard actually got to connect with him.
Yeah.
But he's the most spoiled teddy bear in the world. Everybody in Cleveland knows him. He's the most famous teddy bear there. And his motto is, let's make the world a better place, one teddy bear at a time.
He has his own dugout at the Cleveland Indians?
Well, the Cleveland Indians, up until they renovated the field this past few months, had dugout suites, which are right on the field.
Yeah.
And we started a tradition that came from my dad. My dad had brothers, and they always would take a week of vacation off. That was Boys Week out.
Right.
And my dad mentioned to me, he goes, Maynard, he has to live with you. And I grew up as the only girl in a gang of guys. He needs a boys' night out. So it started out as boys' night out. We did the first one when he was 21, because then he was old enough to drink. And it's just all my closest male friends, male bonding, and 98% of my friends are men. And he just turned 46, so we had this was his 25th anniversary in the dugout, and they always put him up on the Jumbotron. His birthday greeting this year was "Happy Birthday, Maynard, chasing chicks at 46."
Yep.
So
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
I mean, just having that young at heart attitude, enjoying that. So you're from Alabama.
No, I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. According to my dad, I was conceived there too. But my parents grew up in Alabama.
Alabama, okay.
Yeah, but they came up to Cleveland because, in the 50s, it was before the Civil Rights Act passed. There was really no opportunity for education or job opportunities, so they were in Cleveland.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, got it. So we're going to talk about your dad, but I'm holding that for now because you've got some fantastic dad stories. What first drew you to music and to your love of music?
Well, I first, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, when we moved into the first house, the house where I was raised, we moved there shortly 9 days before my 4th birthday. And my grandmother, who lived in Alabama, kind of as housewarming gifts, got us a piano.
Yeah.
So my mom, she wanted me to take lessons, so I was classically trained in piano starting at age 4 at Bedford Music Center. It was down the street, and the teacher that my mom wanted me to have looked at me and goes, "I can't take her. Her hands are too little." But my mom pushed, and so he assigned me to a different teacher, Mrs. Rudolph, who, taught me the basics and everything. But one day I was in there at one of my lessons. He's like, "Who is that piano player?" And he came in. Mr. Justo was his name, and he goes, "I need you as a student." I said, "Oh, I thought my hands were too little." So, but he took me on after that, and then I picked up clarinet and when I was in elementary school. And then the first day of junior high, we had 6 elementary schools, and then they merged into 2 junior highs and then 1 high school. But the first day of band camp when I was in 7th grade, I met my best friend, Bob Gray. He's a PhD chemical engineer, but an incredible drummer. His dad was a drummer, and people in jazz bands always have to have several bands. So when I met Bob, he kind of opened my eyes to jazz and rock and roll. And, we played in bands, we paid our way through school, playing in bands and doing whatever odd jobs. But it was funny because, 7th grade, I went to Broadway Elementary School. I hear there's a kick-ass keyboardist at Broadway Elementary School. I'm going to ask her to be in my band.
And you did?
Yeah. Well, we met, and then, yeah. But we probably had the most eclectic collection of albums because his older brother, Richard, worked at Peaches Records.
Okay.
And he would pass along his employee discount to us. And back then, it was albums. So there were a lot of really cool bands from outside the country I bought albums for just because the album cover was cool.
Yeah.
Like Passport. Who's ever heard of Passport?
Right.
Klaus Daldinger and Gong Espresso. So, and we had a band director who really let us fly too. We had a marching band, we had a stage band, and another album we bought is called A Funky Thigh That Sings by Billy Cobham.
Okay.
Has an orangutan on it. He allowed Bob took a song called, what was it? Yeah, it was A Funky Thigh That Sings, and arranged it for our jazz band. And so it wasn't made for us, but we played it.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
And then you transitioned. You still have jazz. We'll talk a little bit more about jazz. Yeah. But then you like rock and roll.
Yeah, when I was in college, just kind of as a fluke, I worked on Thursdays. Thursday mornings. It was called the Bozo Breakfast Club. It was number 2 rock and roll station in Cleveland. And I was on a show called the Bozo Breakfast Club with Joe Benson and Doug Johnson. And we were, that was before the FCC found Jesus. So we could just do anything we could to beat number 1, which is MMS, which is still existing in Cleveland. But we kind of had a cult following. You could win, listeners could win a chance to sit in our studio, but they had to wear a red clown nose, because it was a Bozo Breakfast Club.
Yeah, fun.
And we always had an act from the Cleveland Comedy Club, and we also had a live band in the studio. So it really gave some exposure to local bands. But again, we didn't realize it was such a cult following, but it's kind of pinnacle in the history of Cleveland radio that we were the first show to broadcast live. McDonald's came to us and they said, we think you should go live. Well, nobody went live then.
Right.
They said, no, we'll sponsor breakfast for the first 200 people in if you broadcast live. And for the audience, I think it was great. But for us, you can broadcast in a row. Nobody can see you. Now we're at these college campuses, like, we did Cleveland State in their big arena. And they can see us and we can see them, and everybody, these jacked up kids with red clown noses on. It was a lot of fun.
And were you the first to interview the police?
Yeah, we on our
Stain?
Yeah, that we interviewed the first police, their first tour to America. Pat Benatar when she first started. That's when I first met Michael McDonald, because I was planning to go to med school, obviously, and I purposely made my organic chemistry lab class. I took it at night rather than during day to free up Thursdays, and they said, "Carol, we got this interview. You got to come in." I'm like, "No." Then who was it? You know what? You don't want to know who it is? And Michael McDonald. I'm like, I love him. So yeah, I interviewed him, and I still have his picture, that he autographed for me on my nightstand.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I met him, multiple times. I actually, the New Year's Eve before last New Year's Eve before the pandemic, I was in Maui because Shep Gordon, Alice Cooper's manager, has a fundraiser there.
Yeah.
And Michael and Pat Simmons always come. So yeah, in the green room we had dinner together. It was fun.
How fun. Absolutely.
He's a sweetheart.
And then the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's in Cleveland.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
come?
Well, because again, there was a contest, there was a competition to see which city would get it. Because the Hall of Fame has existed, but it was always in New York, but it never really had a place to display things. So when I was in college, I went door to door, getting petitions signed to get in Cleveland, and obviously Cleveland won the bid, and I was there on the ribbon cutting, September 1st, 1995. And I listened to my grandma because I joined the Donor Circle Club member and got a Donor Circle membership. Even though I really couldn't afford it, I saved up the money. And then when the day of the ribbon cutting, I thought, oh, it's, jeans, t-shirt. No, my grandmother always said, always dress above. And I'm so glad I did. I was seated next to Jan Winter and Martha Reeves. And there were a lot of people there, but afterwards there was a reception outside, and then there was one inside. I thought I was going to the outside one. They're like, no, you're in the VIP thing, because of the radio. So went up there and sat with Paul Schaefer and Yoko Ono, and yeah, I still have the streamers that they had when it came down, but. And there was a quote on the website when they were still trying to recruit members from me for years, up until recently when they redesigned their website. I said, with the Donor Circle Club member, or with the Donor Club membership, who needs a country club? So they like that quote. And then I was voted onto the Board of Trustees in 2016, which has just been amazing. Everybody thinks, I love the music, the parties are great, but it's about the next generation. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum has an education department that is, they're superstars.
Yeah.
It's a shame that we have kids in Cleveland that have never been to Playhouse Square, never been to a concert, because they don't have access to it. And look at schools, they're cutting out, it's pay to play, and kids can't afford to play. And then during the pandemic, they just went into super drive. They had resources for teachers, and that reached out to every country in the world to again give the teachers resources to teach music, but also just pre-made programs to engage children. And I think one of my favorite things that they have there is Toddler Rock. It's not a secret anymore, but a good part of my estate will be going to support Toddler Rock.
Yeah.
And to go there and to see the light come up in these kids' eyes when they hear the music and learn about these artists, it makes you know that, I call it vitamin M. Their souls are filled, their brains are filled with something that they really need to become a whole person.
My wife is really pushing for our two littlest kiddos to get into music and just to learn the rhythm. And it really is a game changer for kids to be able to grow up.
Yeah, and even just like dance. I don't have children, but I have 8 godchildren, and never bought them like toys. It's all about let's have experiences. But the other thing, my mother always wanted a flute player and a ballerina. She didn't get either one. She got this rock and roll chick and who can, do the crazy dance. She did enroll me in ballet dance. Yeah. But when my godchildren all live out of town, but when they come, I always would have dance club, and it's about letting them listen to the music. Don't just do something that's so structured. The song that I love to get them, that I usually start them out with is called Majuba, and it's by Herbie Hancock.
Okay.
And it has incredible rhythms, horn sections. I'm like, listen to the horns and move your body to that. I'm like, I'm not going to tell you how to move, just move.
Yeah.
And I still love that song. I think it's a great way to get kids to not only just learn music but dance to it.
Absolutely. Wynton Marsalis is one of my favorite jazz artists, but Bradford Marsalis, I know that you were quoted in a couple of things, and he was saying when you were talking specifically about kids, I've got the quote here. He says,
I can tell you what it was.
"Let me hear it."
Yeah, I was at the Grand Hotel Mackinac. The Grand Hotel used to have a jazz festival. They still do it. It's
In Mackinac
not-
Island.
Yeah, on Labor Day, Labor Day Jazz Festival. It's not what it was in the past. Bob came up with me. That was his first time. He was proposing. I had to plan his proposal. But Bradford was playing. And when you're there, the artists stay in the hotel and they have these clinics. And so, yeah, you get to jam with them. But during Bradford's clinic, somebody raised their hand and asked, why do you support the Thelonious Monk Foundation so heavily? And he said something very apropos. He goes, when you turn on the TV and you see kids killing each other, killing their friends, look at what we've done to our schools. We've gutted our schools. There's no arts. We've taken out music. It's pay to play. So when you see uncultured adults, or when you see children who've not had culture in their lives, it should be no surprise that you see uncultured adults.
Right. Yeah. When you raise kids without
With
culture, it should be no surprise that you end up with cultured adults.
Right.
And, I think that's such a profound statement, especially in this day and age with social media, with girls especially who are living in this age of they have no idea what reality is.
Yeah.
To be able to have some type of an outlet. So you think music is definitely one of those, huh?
Yeah, and the girls, you also have to add a little self-esteem too.
Just a little.
Yeah. I want every child, girl or boy, be happy, be independent. Not that you shouldn't fall in love. I've never been married. That's okay, but you need to prepare yourself, whether it's through desertion, death, or divorce. Have an education so that if you choose to have a family, you need to be able to support that family equally as a man would.
Yeah, it's something I think that we really need to continue to push. It's such great news that you're really pushing that forward, especially in the Cincinnati area.
Cleveland.
Sorry, Cleveland.
Well, actually, I'm based in Cleveland, but it's a global mission.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of Maynard's motto, let's make the world a better place. It's a global world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One bear at a time. You've had a lot of fun stories. Just you can give me one more. We could talk all day about all of your music stories. I've heard you talk about the Supremes, you having dinner with them once, or Slick. You had some fun time with Slick. Anything else you want to talk about from a music past perspective with all the parties that you've been to?
Oh gosh. There's so many. Mary Wilson, Grace Slick. Oh, geez. I'm trying to think. There's just so many. Sitting at the table with Bruce Springsteen at the induction, which, you don't necessarily curl up with anybody, but he gave me, when he came to Cleveland in April, he held my hand twice and 10th Avenue Friesen gave me his guitar pick. I really enjoy artists that know how to, I always say if you know your craft or whatever it is, if you can teach your craft, you know your craft.
Yeah.
Whether it's medicine, music, whatever. I'm glad to say he's a friend of mine, Steve Smith. He's best known as the drummer for Journey, but he's really a Berkeley-trained jazz drummer.
No kidding.
And my favorite, he has all these jazz fusion groups. He's very, very creative. My favorite one of his is Vital Information.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a drum fantasy camp, and my best friend is a drummer, and I'm very close friends with Andres Ferraro, who's the drummer. He's best known as a drummer for Hamilton on Broadway, but he's really our nation's #1 crossover drummer. I met Andres at the after party for the Rock Hall induction in New York in 2017. And he and Bob are so much alike. I had to get them to meet, but I also wanted him to meet Bob to meet Steve Smith. So we kind of conspired. Bob's wife and I did, and we enrolled him in drum fantasy camp without telling him. And we revealed the surprise. Steve Smith's Vital Information was playing at the Blues Alley in D.C., and Andres and I were up in New York at some of the post-induction parties, and I told Bob, fly to Washington, D.C., we're gonna go see Vital Information. You got to see it. So we got there, and Steve had invited Andres and Bob down to help set him up, which Bob was all stoked about. He thought that was great. But then afterwards, when we went down to the club, we were going to have dinner before, and I'm like, hey, let's go up to the green room, talk to Steve. And Bob's like, we can't do that. I'm like, nah, he won't mind. So we went up there, and I had a bobblehead of Bob at a drum kit, a picture of him. And, it was an image of him. And my father always called him the professor because he loved the way he drummed. So at the bottom of the state, it said Professor Bob Gray. And on the back of the leather jacket that the bobblehead was wearing, Mustang Sally, which is one of our songs that we play. And he opened it up. He goes, gosh, it looks just like me. I'm like, yeah. Well, then in the back, I said, there's an envelope. He opened it up. There was another box with an envelope in it, and one of my dad's sayings is "Every day is Christmas." And people would say, "Why? Every day is not Christmas." He goes, "No, every day is Christmas as long as you're with the person that you love." And it was a Christmas ornament mocked up like Ringo Starr's drum set.
Wow!
And then in the envelope, I said, before you open up the envelope. Because I asked her, I said, what did Daddy always say? He goes, every day is Christmas. He's like, oh, well, with the people I love. So when he went to open up the envelope, I said, before you open up the envelope, can an old dog like you learn new tricks? He's looking at me, I'm like, can an old dog like you learn new tricks? He goes, well, maybe. So he opens it up, and it was his enrollment in drum fantasy camp, where he was going to have a week in Chicago getting instruction from Steve Smith, Dennis Chambers, Dave Weckl, and I forget who the other drummer was. I can't even remember. But he looked at both Steve and Andres and goes, you guys are in on it? I'm like, yeah. I said, Professor Gray, meet Emeritus Professor Smith. Prepare.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then Andres, gosh, he has the most generous heart. I was at the Tri-C Jazz Festival. This is before fantasy camp. He calls me up. He goes, I'm playing with Rolling Madone tonight, but afterwards I'm driving to Cleveland to see you. And he didn't know I was at this jazz festival. I said, well, I'm downtown and I'm at this festival. He goes, that's okay. I'm like, why are you driving? I always would fly. Well, I said, let me see if I can get you some tickets. You just crashed my hotel room because everything's sold out. But the reason why he drove is Bob had his drum kit from high school. Andres brought this custom-made, brand new drum kit for Bob to use to practice, to get ready for drum fantasy camp that we kept at my house and until Bob was coming up to visit his mother. And I had to tell Laura, like, make sure he brings the truck and not the car. And I lied through my teeth. And I said, I got this new TV. I don't know how to set it up. Can you come over? And he came in and he's like, what's this? And he's just, he couldn't believe it. And that's just, they're both such giving people.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And the impact they've made on the world. I mean, Journey, such a fantastic band. Yeah.
But you need to, everybody knows bands, but you got to know like sidemen.
Yeah.
Steve's known for Journey, but his jazz groups will blow you away. You got to know that. They may not get airplay, but listen to his. You should listen to his song. My favorite Vital Information is called 7.5.
Okay.
And it's amazing. And then if you really want to see something, Vic Firth, the drum stick company. Prior to the pandemic, they did these. It was a thing called VF Jams, and they had a house band at Vic Firth in the company. But they used the members of Snarky Puppy, who was like one of my favorite jazz jam bands, to do these series, and it featured the drummer. Spud Seawright, his real name is Spud, is Robert, but we call him Spud Seawright. Is one of the drummers for Snarky Puppy, and he did these, and he plays keys. I'm sorry, he's a drummer and a keyboardist, but he made an arrangement of 7.5 called 8.5 for Steve to feature on VF Jams. I didn't know Steve was doing this. I was driving home from Columbus, and I get this emails of, Carol, I know you like Snarky Puppy. Check out this thing. And it's amazing. It shows his showmanship. But again, it's not just show. It's about what's in your heart.
Yeah.
And I think, when I think about musicians who have heart, they do. All three of them do.
Yeah.
You listen to like John Batiste. He's known for New Orleans music, but listen to his new album Beethoven. It's amazing.
Yeah.
If you like
So
Eric
talented.
Clapton, you hear about his bass player Nathan East? Oh, Nathan East, he's got his own music too, and that's a bad thing about stream music. You want to see the artist.
Right. I've seen Garth Brooks twice, and every time he makes a very specific point to introduce every single one of his band members, tell them about the history, how good they are, how amazing they are. So it's such a good point. I mean, yeah, you always see the front person for a band.
Yeah.
But the people that are around them are the ones that make that front person really look good and sound good.
But they also have their own work.
Yeah.
And my other favorite jam band is called Lettuce, Lettuce. Talk about education. These guys, Berkeley School of Music had I don't know if they still have it, but they had a program for kids from underserved communities, like a summer camp. So they all, and you didn't have to be majoring in music, but you could go there. So they met at summer camp, kind of like Bob and I met at band camp. But, they went back to their homes, but they ended up, several of them ended up, they got scholarships to go to Berkeley, and because they wanted to go into music. And they, like a lot of the kids that had silver spoons in their mouth, they didn't have extra money.
Right.
And they didn't have an agent, but they would go around to different clubs and with just regular tape to listen to listen to this. And they said, would you let us play? And that's how they got the name Lettuce, which is spelled Lettuce.
Yeah.
But yeah, they jammed, and nobody ever heard of them. But now that I forget which band they were warming up for. They're just amazing.
Yeah.
Jam band like Tedeschi Trucks band. Derek Trucks. I could listen to Derek Trucks play all day.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, something about jazz music. I absolutely love. Your day job, though, after having all this fun, you're a physician, an ED physician. I was a paramedic in the Aurora, Colorado area for about 10 years. So taking patients in to the receiving physician at an emergency department, there's a very unique relationship, especially if you go there quite a bit.
Yeah.
And you've been a physician for how long?
Oh, I'm giving my age. Since I was 16. Oh, gosh. Has it been 30? Yeah, 30. Well, you mean an emergency physician or a physician?
Yeah. Well, emergency physician, yeah.
I'm going on 35 years.
Yeah. And you're still actively doing it. I mean, when we were on a plane together just yesterday, you were...
Coming off shift,
Yeah. So what have you seen as far as changes in the world of emergency medicine, especially as we're kind of moving into 2025?
Yeah, well, first of all, when I started, there were hardly any women in emergency medicine, and certainly not in EMS. It's, technology and advances are good, I struggle with the fact that when I trained, and I give full credit to two of my attendings are near and dear to my heart. First is Dr. Dan Storer, who's now deceased. He was my med school advisor and ended up being the head of our air medical program. And then Dr. Mel Otten, who to me is, greatest of all time. He's a emergency medicine, board of emergency medicine, toxicology, and wilderness medicine, and military guy.
Yeah.
And because we won a big challenge against the Department of Surgery to get the helicopter, it was just like, we're going to pull out the stops to save a life. He taught us how to rappel.
Wow.
Just hands-on stuff. We didn't need ultrasounds to do things. Street medicine. And it's great that kids have ultrasound now and all this technology, but think about the doctors we're training now. A lot of them weren't even born during Blackout 2003.
Right.
We didn't have power for 3 days. And I didn't realize, that's the first time I really noticed a gap. I was sitting next to a guy during that time, one of my fellow physicians, and he goes, gosh, I need to get a CAT scan. I think this guy has a kidney stone. I need to send him out. I was, because the CAT scanner was down. I was like, no, you could do an IVP. It's a dye inject. Yeah. Right. And I thought, wow, he goes, well, I've never read one. I said, well, we're going to do one. I'm going to teach you how to read it. But then what's going to happen when radiology techs are not taught that anymore?
Right.
We still need to be able to, everybody uses these glidoscopes to intubate, but you still need to know how to intubate without one. Mm-hmm. And now I've got docs like, gosh, I don't know. I'm like, what are you going to do if there's a disaster on the street and you can't help a paramedic because you don't have that glidoscope? Better to let the paramedic do the intubation because they've been doing it every day.
Yeah.
Blind.
Yeah.
Without, I call it without toys.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, with AI kind of coming in, they're seeing, can an AI make diagnoses comparable to a doctor? And they're sometimes saying, well, the doctor bias with AI may not help. So yeah, it's one of those things is what's the fine line of really having the long-term street knowledge of seeing everything versus where we're kind of going toward, it seems.
Yeah. But the one thing that AI can't replace and the one thing that you cannot teach in a classroom is caring and compassion.
Yes.
It's got to come from your heart. And sometimes the best medicine or an adjunct to medicine is hold a patient's hand when they're scared. Talk to them, give them a hug if they're having a bad day. I hope we don't get it to that point where, a patient's like a barcode that you slide down a machine and, throw into the CAT scanner and like a piece of groceries.
Yeah. I mean, as a medic, it was so easy to get burnt out, lose that servant's heart, pick someone up, not ask them questions, take them to the ED. Keeping that compassion in all facets of life, not just medicine, is going to be really challenging, as we've kind of talked about in this day and age.
And we're seeing a shift. This is the first group of people trained in medicine during COVID where they were doing everything remote. And as a result of COVID, we lost a lot of good years of experience. People retiring earlier, just getting out. That's my other worry is, what's going to be our deficiency in leadership?
Yeah.
Medical leadership, strong medical leadership, where people are just following protocols and they're not using innovation as part of their thought process.
Yeah. Oh, it's profound. I mean, with the baby boomers exiting the workforce, there's a massive gap in, on the front line, active leadership training. Yeah. Which it's going to affect all facets of at least the public sector.
Yeah.
So I have 3 kiddos. I've got a 9-year-old Bromley, 6-year-old Callan, and then I've got Allegra, my 3-year-old. Talking with you, as we've talked a couple times before, I endeavor for my daughter to look up to me the way that you look up to your father. Yeah. And really emulate some of the lessons that he imparted on you as I raised my own kids. So tell me a little bit more about your dad.
Well, my dad grew up in poverty in the South, in Alabama, family of 15, 8 boys, 5 girls, 2 baby machines, and a 3-bedroom dirt floor house in Alabama, which is not a good place for minorities at that time. But they were very tight. They all got college degrees through the GI Bill. All served in the military. All had great careers. My dad was the 6th son, and then my favorite uncle, my Uncle Emmett, who was my godfather, was the 3rd son, and he also used the GI Bill to, go to podiatry school. He was on staff at the Cleveland VA his whole career, and they just helped each other. When my dad was in college, he lived with my uncle, so my dad wouldn't have the burden of room and board.
Right.
And they were just the closest family ever. My dad, I think to me, he's the greatest mortal man that ever walked the planet. He never. He was all about empowerment, and he never taught us how to think or say "I can't." My sister and I were laughing just the other week, like, everything's so boxed in, like, this person's Catholic, this person's black, this person's a woman. We grew up not really knowing that we were a certain race, or that women weren't supposed to do certain things, because whatever we wanted to do, he would make it happen.
Yeah.
And one of the examples I think I mentioned to you, it was before the Civil Rights Act passed, and Daddy took my sister and I to the '64 championship game of the Cleveland Browns. There is hope for the Super Bowl. And, how many people, that was like the Super Bowl, how many people would take their 3 and 4-year-old daughters there? And, but as a child, I just noticed this guy escorting people to different seats. And my dad I can't ever admit my dad ever spanking me. But he was such a good actor. If you did something bad, he would get this downcast look in his eyes, and he'd make the tears well up. I'm so hurt, or I'm so disappointed. I'm sorry, Daddy, I didn't mean to hurt you. But I asked him about that, and he got the look in his eyes. He goes, it's terrible. Right now there's laws in this country where they're not allowed to sit with us. And we have the best seats in the house. And it's terrible. They're shunned. I thought, this is terrible. He goes, well, we can change that law. I'm like, yeah, Daddy, we need to, so they can, sit with us. And then I remember when we were leaving, he was holding my hand, and I gave him a hug and gave him a kiss and thanked him, because my mom didn't want us to go. She didn't think that was a ladylike thing to go. And then that following spring, he took me to my first Cleveland Indians game.
Yeah.
And again, explained to me about that. And as we were leaving, I said, "Well, do the Cleveland Indians have something like the championship?" He goes, "Yeah, it's a World Series." And I pulled him down. I gave him a kiss. "Thanks for taking me. I'm going to take you to the World Series one day." And when we went to the World Series in '95 and '97, yeah. Kept my promise. Yeah, it was good.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, for him to have that attitude and portray a very difficult situation before the Civil Rights Act was passed to you in a completely reversed appreciation for it. I mean, it's profound, especially in that time.
Yeah, and those lessons didn't stop. He was the most patriotic guy in the world. Nobody loved America more than he did. And when I took him to, as I got out of school, I wanted to make sure my parents actually had some of their dream things. He loved Oprah, so I took him to go see Oprah.
Yep.
And she's amazing. And then he was stationed in the Panama Canal before he got married when he was in the Army. So I booked us for a 2-week cruise, and I got a family suite. We each had our own bedroom, but we shared the living room. But he was an impeccable dresser, and we had 3 formal nights. So we were in American Commodore having him try on different things. I mean, he would just try trying to sign. But he was talking about his Army days, and he was saying it's going to feel so good to go down there and be able to go into town and actually dress. And I was puzzled by that. But when he was in the service, he said the white officers would beat the black officers up if they went into town dressed. So he always had to wear, tennis shoes and overalls, which was not him. And I was getting more and more disturbed by this. And I just abruptly said, we got to get out of here. And we got in the car. And he knew I was upset. And he's like, baby, what's wrong? I said, I cannot believe you're like the most patriotic guy in the world. I can't believe officers treated you like that. And he just said, calm down. He goes, people will treat you a certain way, but you have control over what you do. He could just let bitterness just roll right off of his back. He goes, they could have done anything to me, but they could not stop me from serving my country. And I was serving my country. But then I sat back and I looked at him and I said, well, this time when you go to Panama, you're not going to have a rented tuxedo on your back. You're going to own it. So I had three tuxedos custom made for him, and one he really loved. It's just the mirror. He was in the mirror saying, gosh, when I go to the pearly gates, this is where I want to be dressed. So when he passed away, I buried him in that tuxedo. And the same thing when we we were just going to go to Chicago one night to see Oprah.
Yeah.
And I went to pick him up. It was a birthday present, so I had a limo pick us up. One night he had this huge suitcase. But again, he was trying on all these different clothes because he just, I got to look good for Oprah. And then after the show, at that time, you couldn't. At that time, she used to greet people on the way out, and she had her two security guards, on either side.
Yeah.
And he shook her hand, but then I never saw him fall apart. He was just like weeping. Oh, thank you. And I said, actually, Miss Winfrey, this is my dad, and this is his Father's Day gift. And she goes, Father's Day this year or last year? Because it was, we went on my birthday,
Right.
actually, in April. And I said, this year. She pushed the security guards aside and gave him a big hug. Well, happy Father's Day, Mr. Cunningham. Happy Father's Day. Now my dad is like sobbing, like, oh my God, I've never seen him like this. And there was a shadow that came back, and it was Stedman Graham. And that time she had filmed 2 shows a day, and we were at the first show. But he helped my dad back into her office and got him together and everything. And we sat there, and Oprah came back and was talking to us. And she asked us, she goes, I've got to go to the next show, but do you want to go to my restaurant? I said, we are actually, I already have reservations there for lunch. And I said, we just have to get a cab. She goes, oh, no. She had a limo drive us to her restaurant.
Wow.
She comped, he got the Oprah's potato bowls, and also had a limo take us to the airport the next morning.
It's fantastic.
And I wrote her a letter just saying, my dad grew up from humble means. I said, I'm trying to make all of his dreams come true. And just that hug meant it was worth like winning the lotto. She wrote me back in her own writing.
Okay.
Talk about a class act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you were younger, your dad helped you build a treehouse, I heard?
Well, yeah. Well, he had this thing. Every day you came home from school, you had to tell him what you learned. But we moved into this house before, like I said, 9 days before my 4th birthday. And it was my house. But one of the things I wanted was a treehouse. So he was a military guy planning. You could plan. He had this big sheet of paper out. And he goes, okay, we have to make the blueprint for the treehouse. So we're drawing all these different pictures and building the treehouse. And I had a room with a special stairway that had a door so my sister couldn't come in and get my toys. And then once we had it done, he's like, anything else? I'm like, no. He goes, all right, let's go build a treehouse. And we go to the back door. It's a new house, newly built. And he's holding my hand, and he opens up, and there's not even grass there. The grass hadn't been planted. And he goes, when you want to buy a tree house, when you build a tree house, you have to have a tree first. I was like, oh, he goes, that's okay. He got me in the car and we went to the gardening center, got a sapling. He got me a little shovel for kids. He goes, we're going to plant the tree so you can build that tree house. So we planted it and he goes, you got to water it. So yeah, by the time the tree was big enough to hold a house, I wasn't interested in a tree house.
Yeah. The lessons, they're fantastic.
But it shows you, you have to think things through and the consequences and planning and that kind of thing.
One of the things that is very apparent, especially in today's society, is fatherlessness.
Yeah.
And, especially boys not having a father and how that can just profoundly impact the ability of them to be able to rise up as they move forward. And you've talked a number of times about how your dad helped out some of those boys in the neighborhood when they were, lost. And he helped them to find that ethos, those values, those morals. Can you talk any more about those?
Yeah, to me, Daddy was a universal dad. He was he worked nights. I don't know when he slept. He was a playground monitor, so he knew all the kids in the neighborhood. My best friend Bob was as close to his dad as I was to mine. And unfortunately, Bob's dad passed away suddenly at age 43 when we were 14. And my dad just kind of took him under his wing. I mean, nobody could replace Bob's dad. But, he was like a father figure to Dad. And so Bob, even though we're not related, clearly he's like my big brother.
Yeah.
He sometimes reminds me that he's older when he's trying to tell me something. That's okay. But no, I was at a jazz festival and Key Bank sponsored it, and some of the Key Bank employees were there, and there was one of the VPs there talking. We were talking about how schools were getting gutted, and it's tough to raise kids in an environment. And he was saying, there was this guy in my neighborhood who was like the go-to guy. Anytime I needed advice, I would go to him. And I said, I don't have kids, but I'm a godmother, and my godparents, I would go to my dad for advice, but and my dad pretty much, I knew everything, but sometimes I go to my godparents for advice. And I think every kid needs like a non-parental adult they feel comfortable talking to.
Yeah.
And as he got going, he goes, yeah, boy, I just go across the street and talk to Mr. C. And I realized that this guy was a toddler. He was a son of, a brother of a guy I went to high school with. And it just hit me so hard. It just made me surprised.
Yeah.
And I was very touched not surprised, but very touched that he contributed, my dad contributed to his success.
Yeah.
But I made him, after he passed, I made a memorial that's at Tri-Point Hospital in Concord. And they placed it actually on the floor where the neonatal unit is, which was perfect because he loved kids.
Yeah.
And I collect art, but Romero Brito made a sculpture of a teddy bear that has Swarovski crystals in the tie, and the sculpture is called Winter Bear. But what I had on the plaque was a quote. Has that it's in honor of my Percy Lee Cunningham, and the quote on there is, "The measure of a man is not how tall he stands, but how many times he kneels to help a child."
Wow.
Which. And people say that's like their favorite.
Of course.
Favorite thing, but the one time Daddy was real serious. People like, why is she carrying this teddy bear? It's kind of a screening tool for people's character.
Sure.
And when I was real little, I love stuffed animals, but I don't know, I had an affection for teddy bears, and he had a serious look on his face. He goes, if you ever meet somebody who doesn't like a teddy bear, you need to get as far away from them as possible because there's something seriously wrong with them. I was like, okay, Daddy.
It's true.
It is true. It is true.
Absolutely. Yeah. And your dad helped a kid burn down a house or something?
Well,
this conversation.
it was a rerun of my Treehouse. I was a flight physician for 7 years, and I worked a shift at Cleveland Metro Life Flight in Solon, and I was just too tired to go home, so I just crashed at my parents' house, and the doorbell rang, and it was a kid, probably 6, 7 years old. I mean, kids always came over because, again, I guess it was. I mean, it's kind
Even
of
when you're
sad.
grown, he's still just bringing kids into the house to
Well,
teach
the
them.
kids didn't have any place to go. You know, it was kind of sad.
Yeah.
But I was glad he was there to fill the gap. But I answered the door. My dad had been sleeping. I answered the door, and I didn't know who it was. He goes, "Is Mr. C home?" I was like, "Yeah, he's here, but he's sleeping." And then I hear my dad, "No, no, I'm up. Come on in." So the kid gets his face lights up. "Hi, Mr. C." And he goes, "Well, what are you going to learn today?" He goes, "I want to learn how to burn down a house." And I was like, pulls out this white sheet of paper, just like, planning sheet, just like he did with the treehouse. And I'm sitting there thinking, you got to tell this kid you can't burn down the house. But again, it was about planning and learning the consequences of your actions. So he drew a blueprint of the house, and they had matches over here and a gasoline tank over here, and then all these different places where you could start it. And he goes, "Okay, now we have that done. Where do you want to start? Where do you want to burn the house down?" He picked one spot. He goes, "Okay, your plan worked. The house is gone." And the kid's going, "Yay!" "Well, where are you going to live?" "Oh, we'll just build another house." He goes, "Oh, no. Insurance companies don't replace houses that you burn down. That's called arson, and you can go to jail for it. And even if they don't catch you, you still don't have a house." And well, this kid, again, strategic thinking. "That's okay. I'll just pitch a tent, just like I do at Boy Scout camp, and then I can just live in the tent." And Daddy goes, "Okay, that's good for the summertime, but we're here in Cleveland, and what are you going to do when it gets cold and snowy?" "I'll just build this fireplace, and it'll just keep us warm. And I know how to build it. I know how to set it on fire." He goes, "Great. Okay, now you're warm. Now it's Christmas. Santa Claus is delivering all of his toys. Where's he going to go?" "Well, you could just land." "Oh, no, no, no. Santa doesn't land on tents. They collapse. Santa only lands on roofs because roofs are only strong enough to hold his sled and all the reindeer. And Santa only goes down chimneys with gifts. He just doesn't land on a tent and just drop it by your house. Anybody could come and pick it. He has to put it inside through the chimney." All of a sudden, the kid's sitting back. He goes, "Yeah, just stay in the tent with the fireplace, and you can go over other kids' houses who still have a house and have chimneys, and then you can play with their toys." And kid's lower lip starts quivering, and he starts crying, "No, no, no! Let's not burn the house down. I don't want to lose Christmas. I want to live in my house, and I don't want anybody to burn it down. I don't want it. We have to save it." And I was like, whew. Finally, he got to that point after sitting there for an hour planning this arson crime. and when he left, I was like, "Daddy, I wanted you I understand why you did it." He goes, "Yep." He taught him a lesson. He's not going to do that. I said, "Yeah, but now you've totally destroyed his and his wife's lives." And he's like, "No, I didn't. How did I do that?" I said, "They'll never be able to enjoy a romantic candlelight dinner, ever." He just laughed. He goes, "Yeah, that's okay."
Yeah, it's these such great stories, and yes, we could spend hours. I would love to hear all the stories. You just look at, like we talked about initially, these boys that don't have father figures in their life, and they don't have Mr. C to help them out. It can cause such a detriment to their ability to grow and be better humans and men and fathers themselves. So it helps me, as a dad, to think, all right, be more present with my kiddos. Take the time, take the hour to really dive into their imagination, so that they can, learn those lessons and learn them the right way. I mean, that's a core memory for that kid, I'm sure.
And also to empower you that you can do things that nobody else has ever done.
Yeah.
And especially for girls, I have 4 goddaughters, and I've done again, that empowerment stuff. But with girls, it's tough when they get to be teenagers.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad I was close to my father because he set a great example. And I think women who have really close relationships with their fathers make better choices in their husbands or boyfriends, how employers treat them, etc. You know, it reaps so many benefits. I mean, not that moms aren't bad, but I don't know. For me, it was my dad from day one. His biggest dream was to be a father, and I was the firstborn. So he just, April 13th, best day of my life, and he would take his day off from work every birthday. Had incredible parties that I didn't realize how incredible they were until I was in kindergarten. I went to other kids' birthday parties. I felt sorry for them. I'm like, this is all you get. But then, he just taught me how to do everything. Paint my house when I was 5.
Yeah.
Took the time to do that. Taught me how to change oil in a car when I was 8. Just so many things. And I always took off for his birthday too. When I was working.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I follow a guy. His name is Nick Freitas. He's out of I think West Virginia or Virginia. And he talked about his daughters. And one of his buddies when he was in the military was a womanizer of the first order. Mm-hmm. And he went to that same guy and said, how can I make sure that my daughters don't fall for a man like you? And he said, the first thing you need to do is tell your daughter you love her.
Yeah.
Tell you love her all the time. And all of those things, if you show as a father the affection, the authentic love for your daughter in particular, that will go far and away to be able to help them move forward.
And I even asked Dad, don't you miss having sons? Because, I grew up as the only gang of guys that have this male bonding.
Right.
And he's like, oh no. He goes, your sons you raised to be men, but your little girls are your little girls for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I found even in that space, when I was with him, I was Carol, his little girl, and my birthday was the national holiday. And even as an adult, you held your little girl's hand so she doesn't get lost. We always held hands. He always would hold my hand, even if we were in the shopping mall or anywhere. And he was probably my closest friend.
Yeah.
He's my father. He was also my closest friend. I didn't have any secrets from him. Bob and I went to Mardi Gras, and this is I can say, I mean, I don't have to be in doctor mode all the time, but when I came back, he asked me if I got any beads, and I don't know if you know how you get beads.
I do know how you get beads, yep.
And I looked at him, and I thought, I've never lied to this man in my life. I don't know if he knows, but I'll just tell him the truth. I said, Daddy, I got so many beads. I sent 2 cartons back by UPS. And he just smiled. He goes, that's my girl, having a good time. Where my mom was very conservative. Well, she didn't know, but she was very conservative. Yeah. But my mom, anytime my mother and I got into an argument, it would end in 2 ways. She'd either say, you're just like your father, and I'd look at her and say, thank you. And then, or else she'd say, you're the only person I've ever met who could find a way to have a great time in hell.
That's a perfect segue, actually, to my next question.
Yeah.
It's interesting because being a father, a man, it can be lonely from the perspective of oftentimes you're trying to support your entire family professionally, trying to support your wife, trying to support your kids, and it can be kind of a grind. Supporting that family on a daily basis. You get up, do it over again. At least from a perspective of trying to stay motivated to learn the true, to do the good, love the beautiful. Can you give me some of your advice of what is your advice to keep motivated and set and moving forward in life and having such a zest for life that you have?
Well, I think and I'll tell this to people, and Bob and Andres know this. Bob knew my dad. Andres knows my dad through us. We're like the trio. I look at myself. I'm just a conduit of his mission. He just was so positive, and really concerned. He was a people first person. He may not have had much, but if he saw somebody who needed something, he'd take the shirt off his back and give it to them and keep walking, whatever they needed. Not to the point of being used, or manipulated, but just was always very helpful. Now, having said that, he passed away December 2nd, 2004. That will always be the worst day of my life. I was the one that found him, and it was horrible. But I look at, again, the best way to honor somebody's life is to live yours to the fullest. If you have, the person you love the most, and it's hard. I mean, it's been, and I thought about that, December 2nd, 2024, I've been without him by my side for 20 years now, which was a horrible anniversary. But again, everything I do, I have to honor his mission. Love, put people first, put respect, let bitterness roll over. Bitterness will hold you back. And be able to have a conversation with people who don't agree with you 180 degrees. His family, the Cunninghams, they were very cosmopolitan. We probably have every race and religion in our family. And but they just, I mean, things that aren't funny. They'd make lemon out of lemonades. As an example, and I'll speak to it now. My favorite aunt, who was my godmother, passed away tragically, just less than 3 weeks ago.
Wow, yeah.
And she was a white woman from West Virginia who married my Uncle Emmett. And that was unheard of. Unheard of. I was the firstborn, and for some reason my parents thought that they could only have a boy, so I was supposed to be Michael Patrick, and I didn't have a name for like 3 days. But Carol's my first name. But people always ask me, "Why do you hate your middle name?" I'm like, it's a family joke. My middle name's Anita, and the reason why is back then. This is in the my Uncle Emmett and Aunt Phyllis were dating in the 50s, and back then it was legal. Her sister went to court in West Virginia and got a court order to have my Aunt Phyllis committed to a mental asylum because she was dating a black man, and it was legal to do unless you were married. And they had the best marriage I've ever seen. But somebody tipped them off. They went to Canada, and they knew to come back in the country they needed to be married. They only found, there was one minister at Antioch Baptist Church, which is a black inner city church in Cleveland, who would agree to marry them. But he was afraid of the KKK as well as the backlash from the black community. So the best marriage I ever had seen was done in secret in the basement of a church under one candlelight with my parents as witnesses. Yes. I don't know if my parents were married then or not, but anyway, years later, I was born. I didn't have a name, so my middle name is Anita, who's the name of my aunt's sister who had her committed, and I guess. When they sent out the birth announcements, I guess her head was spinning like The Exorcist, like, oh my God.
Right.
But, she came, my aunt and uncle had a great life. He was on staff of the medical staff of the VA, and my aunt was head of pediatric nursing at Metro Health, and also nationally known in nursing. She was one of the co-founders for the National Association of Pediatric Nurses and Practitioners. Renegade, truly a renegade, but loved her, still love her to death. her sisters, some of them, they married within their races, but to, alcoholic people who lived in trailer parks or whatever. But I just remember when Anita would come up, she'd be on the phone with her friends. My sister has a niece who's a doctor, and she's named after me. And I thought, yeah. When I was a baby, you wanted to like burn a cross in my crib.
Right.
But you gotta let that go. She came around, and
Just like your dad said.
yeah.
Let her roll out.
But that, they would make family jokes like that.
Interesting. What's your key to a successful, zestful life?
Oh wow. Key to successful. It depends. To me,
Those aren't mutually exclusive.
what's successful?
Exactly.
Yeah, you should have a zest for life. If you have a zest for life, you will be successful. And success isn't about money. It isn't about possessions. It's about making a positive difference in this world that will extend beyond your lifetime.
You have 8 godchildren,
Yes.
and I'm sure you spend a lot of time with them. You give them a lot of your insight. You have taught them everything, but they forgot it all. They're all grown. They're all out the door. They've forgotten everything you've taught them except for one piece of diamond advice. I call my kind of diamond advice section. What diamond advice would you give your godchildren if they only could keep one of them?
Well, they all live out of town, so I've had the outreach with
Yeah.
them. But love conquers all.
Love conquers all.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes. And then put it, with a picture of Maynard.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Carol, thank you for the time today.
Thank
It's
you.
been such a pleasure.
Oh, I enjoy it. I hope it helps some children. And I hope
Absolutely.
it helps some dads be better fathers. And I just wish for every girl to have the same kind of relationship with their dad that I did.
Yeah.
It's priceless.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Good over there.
Do you want me to look here or look here? Or
Just like we're having a conversation.
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I love blue eyes. I can look at you.
I like that. Yeah. This is great. So, gentlemen, meet Carol Cunningham. She is